Hello all, Game Methuselah. Want to talk to you today about something that I find kind of really important in the gaming, and I try to talk about it a lot. I don't know whether I get through, but the point being that there's a lot to this game more than just the game itself. Now, I talked to you about rule systems and things like that, and I love them, and I'll more likely point out another rule system here momentarily. But what was really important to me was always the game. Now, in 1975, when D&D started out, the world kind of was a lot like it is right now. A lot of the problems you see internationally, nationally, locally, were problems that were being dealt with back then. Now, I'm not saying that things didn't change. I think things sort of mambo through. They go forward, they improve in certain areas, then maybe they fall back some, or something, other factor interferes, whatever. But the idea is there's always a constant growing forward. And sometimes it feels like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And that's kind of how sometimes life is all the way around. But we had oil prices that were high. Now, high compared to now, no. But high for then, absolutely. And the fact that you had only gas that could be acquired on every other day and things like that, things that went on in that period of time. And then we had inflation. Inflation was ridiculous. I mean, there were times when I was looking at it going, I'll never own a home because interest rates are 18%. And then, things change and the world advances and things get better. And hopefully that's what we're going to see in our future, is things will move forward again. Things will get better. Sort of a lot of the problems will go away. And then new ones will jump up, and then this will all be sort of a rinse and repeat type of thing again. But the point I made about role-playing games is they were sort of the great thing for people who had no economy. Starving college students, people who had low income, people who had wives and multiple kids, people who were trying to pay a high mortgage and interest rate. Those were the things that sapped away, and games were sort of growing in the awareness of people, and for sure role-playing games, because they were the things that were coming up. Avalon Hill games, board games, things I also have talked about, were really fun, but they were a different niche type item. There was really nothing like role-playing out there, which is the idea of getting together with a bunch of friends, building a group, and saving the day, becoming heroes, doing fantastical things, even if in your own life things were pretty mundane or boring, or in some cases even bad. And that's what I often thought role-playing really brought to change the whole gaming environment. There was something here that was in many ways better than general entertainment out there. It was better than TV, it was better than radio, in some ways it was better than reading. It was something totally unique and different that people get into. I'm now doing the playtesting of my game. I think you guys have already known that I'm working on this now. And as I got there last week, I find that, I don't have time to prep adventures. I mean, I'm really here looking to see how the rules work, how the changes we made and how the modifications and how the things that we haven't modified yet are working. Does this work? Does that work? Does this fail? Does that fail? Wow, this is a great rule. Oh, wait, no, it's not. And all the things that go on for any of you who've ever designed anything, and you sit down and try to work out the problems. I mean, you think you fix one problem and a new one pops up, and that's sort of where I'm at. But the interesting point was, I'm there looking at the rules. I'm not thinking about the role-playing. But in doing so, I'm able to role-play in a way that I think I'm fairly skillful at, that has gotten me many accolades over the year, is the fact that I do a good job of role-playing. A lot of times you need to take the temperature of your table. I tell you that the rules of the game don't matter, and they do not. Pick any game system your group likes. If it's original D&D, all the way up to the newest system, something I've never even seen. That's important. All you want to do is get a consensus of a set of rules that you enjoy as a game master, and that your players will either play because, they don't care, they just want to play, or that they like and want to see their characters advance in that system. Many of my subscribers and a lot of you out there obviously watching were talking to me about asking me if I had ever played Dungeon Crawl Classics. Now, I had never heard of Dungeon Crawl Classics. I figured it was somebody who was just sort of kind of hashing on to the old D&D Zero and making something up. And it kind of is. I mean, it's its own thing, trying to feel very much like a vintage 70s game system. And it kind of does. It's filled with charts, which were very 70s. Everything sort of can be done on a chart, and they have a lot of interesting charts. I mean, there was, I think, 7 pages of how to generate a magic sword, which I found really interesting. And a friend of mine said, hey, look, I want to run it. So, of course, I went out and bought the book, started reading it, and I said, it's kind of neat, and ran into a little feature that they have that I really like, which is the idea of this rotating die, where the die starts out as bigger and gets smaller as things get more difficult. I like that feature, but that concept of bell curve, modifications on dice, and things like that were something that always appealed to me, to basically keep the speed up on the game and to throw in another level of interest in it. But my point is, it's a good game. More to the point, when I looked at it, it really reminded me more of the Caltech system, which were a bunch of techies from Caltech, and they were, of course, very smart individuals, loving D&D and playing it, but finding, the game just isn't right. So, of course, we're going to make the Caltech version, and they did. And we used a lot of it in our games back in the 70s. I often say that Southern California was sort of half Dungeons and Dragons and half Caltech. You sort of had the Caltech variant of D&D, and that's kind of what everybody modified on, where there were spell points and different things that were utilized within the game. Now, not everybody did, but I think a vast majority of the people, once they saw it, utilized it. More importantly, understand your players. Sit with your players and maybe talk to them as much as you can. Often that worries me, obviously, when you're playing on the internet and the like, that you don't have that opportunity to really get to know what your players are like and what they want and what they're enjoying to see. But as I've been basically working on the playtest, I don't have time to be going through the rules and writing up combat and doing everything else. I'm just running through all the materials of the new things we're trying to fix and improve, mastering the things that I think work and are great. I had the great opportunity to just freely do what I do kind of well. I just wing the game. They want to play this, they want to play that. Last week, they all said, hey, why don't we get together and just play the elves? Let's play the other side of the coin, just to see it. I said, perfectly good. So I put together some elven adventures with the way elves think and the way they work, and very alien concepts. And when I presented it, you could see that people were kind of shocked. And they were like, wow, this is really different. I said, yes, it's different. But let's just move on with it. Don't worry about it. We'll catch up with the color as it goes on. And they had to go to the Driftwood Knoll to recover the Finn's raid after the great disaster, because all the elven kingdom was laid low. The castles were destroyed. There was this ancient place of power where the last of the elven kings slain had taken place, and 10,000 elves had died in a mighty battle. And their ghosts haunted this place, and it was like deadly for anyone to go to. Well, our characters were expendable, so they were getting sent off to go find this magical item of great power that could be used to protect the elves, because though the elves were protected by the ghostly haunts of the Finn's raid, other enemies of the elves were not. So I'm just winging it and running it and talking up the story and looking at the mechanics of how the game's going, not really thinking about it. And there's some advantages in the way my game runs, that I'm not having to be as center focused on the mechanics. DM gets to really sort of reach out now and become more of the storyteller, working on a cooperative story. And that's always been my point. I think role-playing is cooperative storytelling. I know friends of mine don't necessarily believe that, but I do. I think the best thing you can do as a DM is get your players to interact. Now, I'm doing this because I'm running right out of my head, because most of Albion is in my head anyway, and I'm talking about what they're doing and what they're seeing and what's going on, and they're thinking, well, can we do A? Can we go kill these humans? So I'm like, yeah. Is our human characters alive at this point? Can we go attack them? And, all the things you might expect around table talk. And I'm kind of ignoring most of it, and I'm running the story, and they're doing what they want to do. And I'm weaving the story, and I'm weaving it, and I'm weaving the elven lore and and what they're seeing and what they feel. And having played it from the actual perspective of the way it starts with the humans, to look at it from the elven point of view is a very, very different thing. And that's the thing that people don't get. When you are free to be a game master, you're free to allow the players to come into your world and change it. Do what they want. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. But you don't say, elves don't think that way, because maybe your elves don't, but maybe their elves do. So you let them expand upon what they want to do. They went, they found it, they found the city, all the undeads, they battled the ghosts and the spirits. And when they finally achieved and realized what they had acquired, they were like, wow, this is kind of really powerful and deadly. And They then are now going through all the machinations as role players of what do they want to do? Well, do we want to give this back to the people who sent us here to get it? Because are these elven leaders of ours too bitter to know what to do with such a horrible weapon? Would they just wantonly slaughter, their enemies because they're angry or they want what they've got, or vengeance? All the things that happen in war and in reality, and all the bad things that go on. And that's the point in your running of role-playing games. It's not necessarily the mechanics that ever win the game. A great game to play is Call of Cthulhu. Call of Cthulhu, in many ways, I think is one of the most perfect role-playing games, because if you ever actually run into one of the big monsters in the game, you're basically going to die. If you don't die, you'll just end up a blithering idiot in an insane asylum somewhere. That's the nature of it. So you're always in this balancing act of sort of pure role-playing, of trying to get a victory without going so far as to basically get yourself destroyed. That's what's important for being a DM. A DM is, again, like I said, reading the players. Sometimes I would see players like my friend Steve, who might work 3 days in a row in the oil fields. I mean, almost no sleep. Come back in, call me, says, I'm going to take a nap for about 4 hours. I'm going to eat dinner and I want a game. So put together a game and get some people over and we'll game. Because I haven't done anything in 3 days and I'm dying to role play. And we would get there. And I realized, his things have been tough. He's struggling because the world is tough then. Even though he's working hard to make money, maybe it's not enough money, maybe he's having a problem with a sick child, all the things that would go on. He just wanted to get into role play and try to find something that was easier to hold on to and that would brighten his day in doing something heroic. Well, I would see that. And I would be going, okay, and the other guys, well, they're all there playing because, well, they're doing what they're doing and they have their own motivations. And I'm always looking for what they want out of it. But for, say, in this situation, we had a battle with this demons. And it wasn't a really big demon. These characters weren't particularly powerful. But the battle went on and they were sort of losing. And I thought, how am I going to pull the rabbit out of a hat here? Now, of course, I don't want to voice this because I, of course, never modify games. But let's just say for a moment that I might. Now, Steve had a +1 magical shield that had this face on it. And I just sort of had done it as a whim. And it was just something to give him in a +1 magical shield, because a +1 magical shield at this point in the game was something big. And I kind of wanted it to be a little bit more big. But it had the shield of the face of the wizard who had lived at this location. And the demons were winning and were winning. Now I thought, it doesn't have to really be a +1 shield. Maybe it's a +5 shield that's been glamored. The glamour is so powerful that not only shields you from knowing that it's a +5 shield, it maybe prevents you from realizing that it's adding a better defense to you. So you never have to give it this. As a DM, you do this. And the battle raged on. And I said, Steve, your shield is glowing. And he's like, I don't understand. And he's like, I said, it's starting to emanate heat. And I said, are they throwing a spell on me or doing something? I said, I don't know. And he says, I rip it off and I throw it on the ground. And I said, the face seems to be shining as if it's like taking an effect, as if it's doing something. And instead of grimacing, it almost seems to be smiling. He says, I don't understand. And he's like, and I said, it seems to be giving off some wave. And you notice there's some trepidation amongst the demons. They're sort of avoiding you. And he's like, wait a minute. So he shifts the shield over in front of the wizard and stands on it and says, I'm not going to let it go. And the battle rages on. And as the fight goes on, of course, this powerful shield is aiding him and it's providing him with abilities and he's able to beat off the demons. Now, this was never the plan in my adventure. It was a throwaway little dungeon crawl. But everybody at the table was getting so excited about the fact there was something different going on, something heroic going on. Steve, of course, was having a tremendous time. I mean, the flaming Balrog comes up and he swings his flaming sword and Steve blocks it with his little magic one axe. And the axe flames up and the shield throws more powerful. So now the axe is burning, but it's not affecting him. It's providing him abilities against, well, not the Balrog, but the other demons. And the battle raged on. Now, I'm sure I've embellished the story a bit over the 40-some years that have passed since then. But the point of the outcome was it was a hard-fought battle with a couple casualties, and they won. They saved the day, they rescued the maiden, and when he picked up the shield, I said, the shield appears to be a +1 shield. Looks exactly the same as it did before you carried it into battle. But basically what I made this shield, this great bane against demons. Now, I did it instantaneously on the fly. And as you're DMing, and you can freely do that, you can do these things. Pull these stories up. Never tell anybody you made it up. Never tell anybody it wasn't already planned out. Now, I didn't do this because it improved my storyline and my campaign. It didn't. I did it because at this moment in time, in the real world, they needed more than just the standard hack and slash and do whatever. It's often up to the DM to run their adventure and make it more heroic. But who's to know? It's like the Teeth of the Dragon. Everyone always like, well, we're going to do the Teeth of the Dragon. And I'm going to like sit down and write all this up and do all this stuff. But in all truth, the Teeth of the Dragon were something that I made to suit Fantasy Trip. Fantasy Trip had a maximum plus of +5. So what I would do with the weapons is, you could have a +2 weapon with +2 to hit, +2 damage. So you had a +5. Well, I made my Teeth of the Dragon one better. But the neat thing I did is I looked at the weapons. Now, weapons did damage based on strength. So the lowest weapon was a rapier, and then it went up, cutlass, short sword, broadsword, bastard sword, great sword, all the things that would go up the line. Well, I just sort of picked in the middle. But then I picked out, and then I had each one of them, and I made them +6 weapons. I gave them an additional enhancement, and I made them fine, which meant they did additional fine damage, and they wouldn't break, and all the cool things you want. And then I gave each one of them a bane, and then I gave each one of them a spell that was based upon what their bane was. That was it. It wasn't brilliance. I mean, they've been touted, and everyone else. And it's like they've become sort of legendary, and that's what you want. You want things to become legendary. But truthfully, I'm happier to have you go grab the concept of them. Maybe you call them the same thing. Maybe you use them as the Teeth of the Dragon. That's perfect. People have sent me their Teeth of the Dragon versions, and they're different. And I like that. I like the fact that they're making things their own and making part of it their game. And maybe they've done things to help people move forward in their campaigns. Now, I have a reputation for being a really evil DM, killing lots of players. I'm sure you've heard that. But truthfully, I do. I kill a lot of players. But the thing is, it's always in a situation that I don't like cheap deaths. When Matt interviewed me, he asked me, what was the thing that I hated the most about game. And he was, when he was waiting for some special thing. And I said, I hate it when I break people's heart. And that's truly it. All the time I DM and I run and I play, I'm always listening and looking and thinking about what the players are doing, what they want to do, how they want to run their characters, how they want to grow their characters, and I look to do that. And that is, I think, maybe the most important lesson I can pass on to you. Find out what your characters are doing. Get into their heads. Maybe you don't give them what they ask for, but you give them something that is more in line what you visualize they're looking to get to. And often you'll find that they didn't imagine that they could have achieved as much as what you are going to lay open for them to do. And that's important. And it becomes more important the longer your campaign goes. I know a lot of you are fans of Critical Role. It's an excellent role-playing game. And I like the people in it. That was the one thing. I like the characters, but it's important when you're running your game, and especially as you watch the interaction between the people. It's the interaction between the people that becomes the most important thing in the game. The best game I can ever run, and I know you've heard about it, my time when we obviously had the staff and gave it back to Zeus and the things like that went on over the many decades of playing, is when people walk out and they go, that was the best game I've ever played. Or that was one of the most exciting times I've ever had. So what I want you to do as a DM, because I know this is tough, is sit down and pull out a module if you're going to run modules, write a dungeon if you're going to write a dungeon, put a bad guy in there who maybe can be expanded upon and grown in the future, throw out some magical items that kind of look really good, but maybe nothing. But maybe they could be something in the future, really up to you. Maybe they're glamored weapons that are nothing important, but they really are. Those are things that I find very interesting in games, where you give people things that can evolve. And evolving magic, I think, is a real nice way to go. I really hate it when you had a sword, and you love the sword, you carry the sword, you do all this stuff in your character, you've got a miniature that you put on a special sword that looked like your sword, and then you find a better magic sword and you throw that one in the garbage, or you give it to somebody else. And now, why didn't we just have an evolution of something? How maybe this thing was always the world-saving sword. Maybe it grows with you. Anyway, lots of things. But when you now do this, concentrate on your role playing. Listen to what your players are saying, and then start to see if you can find a way to make their goal happen in your game. Always been my main focus all the time in running games is always trying to get the players to be interactive in the game, excited about it because now they see it as their game. And of course, eventually you have to push and poke, and you got to get it all, depending on how many players you have, it could be really a daunting challenge. You've got to get everybody's little piece of what they want in the world going forward with them. And that works. But you got to sometimes try to make sure you keep it even. It's like anything else. You don't want to get one person unbalanced and the other people kind of bored. So it's always got to be a little something. And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes you have players who aren't really interactive, and they're kind of like, I'm just, here to play, and I just want to have fun, and I don't really know, or I don't feel comfortable, or all the things, and you don't want to make them feel uncomfortable. So you work within the parameter they're willing to work with. Maybe you do like Matt did, like I pointed out, he had a solo adventure, the guy dies. Oops, you died. Boo, you're a ghoul now. What do you do? Oh, wait, you still got your memory. Well, I'm going to go, I'll do all these things and eventually become a hero. It's super cool. Now, I doubt Matt planned that to happen, but when it did happen, Matt used every bit of his skill to do it. When you listen to Matt doing the videos, like the first ones he did a little one dungeon. Here, I'm doing a little dungeon for you. So you can have a dungeon. Here you go. This is how you make a dungeon. Boom, go run this dungeon, and now you have it. Well, there's no difference than just making it up as you go. You just have to get used to that muscle and that skill of being able to do that. And, prep, be prepared, run stuff. But, if things turn out and you want to embellish it a little bit, as Matt talks about it, rolling behind the dungeon screen, which I don't do because I don't want the dice to decide. I want the players to always know that everything's on the up and up. It is. It's on the up and up. It's all coming out of my mind. So if it came out of my mind 6 months ago or last week or right this moment, it's still the same. I still created the mythology, the lore, the power, the magic, the battle, everything that happened, I created. And if I create it as I'm on the fly, it's just as valid as though I created it 4 days ago or a week ago or 6 months ago or 40 years ago. It's still the same. Don't brag about it. Don't talk about it. It isn't part of it. It's what it is. Maybe I did do it 3 weeks ago. Maybe I did do it a month ago. No one will ever know because that is the way it has to be. Some people might surmise, but if you've ever role-played, there's always some change in the game that happens based upon a diplomacy roll or something else. I ran an entire game without combat because my damn party kept diplomatically rolling ridiculous skills and getting all the monsters not to fight them. And then they would parlay with them to trade them stuff so they got the things they wanted and the monsters got some beads and rattles and toys, or even in some cases, things the monsters wanted. It's an interesting way to play. It's an interesting way to think. And I don't want you to do it every day. And if you do it every day, people are going to catch on. But what you want to do is always keep that one card in your repertoire of some way of being able to change the game on a dime with a flash and be there for the players with something truly unique that they're going to be able to feel like they're controlling the world. They're making a difference, and they're making the difference, and they're enjoying themselves, and being happy with the game is what you want. And in a time like now where there are a lot of people who are very stressed and in many ways not necessarily happy with the way the world is going. I mean, it's frightening to turn on the news and listen to basically everything. Because I remember all this. I remember the Russian Cold War, that we were going to get nuked, and I remember the failed Vietnam War and how that, people hated soldiers. I mean, how did you hate a soldier? Well, you hated your baby killers. Well, were they? I mean, now you find these very people wishing they hadn't done that. Well, that happens. I remember rising gas prices becoming like, oh my God, what are we going to do? How are we going to afford to drive? And I remember my friend said, well, I'm not going to give up my sports car. All my friends were into fast 70s cars. And they were like, well, shoot, I'll pay for the gas if it hits $1 a gallon, which was unthinkable. Well, it's not so much unthinkable now, but the world moves on and it mambos, sometimes better, sometimes worse. Make the best of it. But in your gaming, enjoy what you're doing. Often you, when you're running a game, might be the bright spot of this person's week. usually when I game, it's the brightest part of my week. And I enjoy it for what it is. And I enjoy it to see how players, especially when I'm role-playing, players that I know are at a certain level, and you see them keep improving, and they're getting better, and they're becoming more fantastical in their stories and better in their game mastering and doing their own adventures or modifying a course. And then, of course, I realize happily that I've infested them with my painting disease as well. Oh, I cannot tell you what a joy that is, to see people painting and collecting miniatures. Okay, that might be a little evil on my part. I do apologize. But I do love the games, and I do love the miniatures, and it almost always has been my bright spot. I mean, even when I made really good money, everything else, nothing really was ever as shiny pretty as the ability to sit down with a bunch of my friends and game. It's always exciting, whether it's, miniature games or board games or role-playing games, collectible card games. You've heard them and seen them all, and sometimes even computer games. So I think I've rambled on tons enough here. On April 8th, and maybe a little bit on April 9th, I'm going to be down in Anaheim at the HMGS PSW group. We play the Knights of Columbus Hall. It's like a 170-year-old church that we use for gaming. It's called St. Crispin's, so if you ever want to look it up on there, even if I'm not there, it's a great group. They've always got things going on. A lot of people who are really willing to share the hobby with you and bring it to you, and a lot of old guys like me who know it and know the rules and know games that you might love to see but have never had an opportunity. And if you show up, they're just going to give you the minis and the stuff, and it's like, hey, you want to play Naval Battle? We got Navy. You want to play this? We got that. Whatever it is you want to play, they're likely going to provide you with the stuff you need to play. So if there's something new you want to see, or if there's something really old, that you want to go experience, show up at St. Crispin sometime for an open house. It's fun. I enjoy it. You're going to meet a lot of good gamers. And sometimes you get lucky and you find things where you can pick up stuff and people will start giving you information, and maybe you'll find new things and new games you want to try. So until I have a chance to speak with you again, fight me devils fight, for I hate peace, at least game peace, and game on.